So I think one of the most positive changes is something we're already seeing, which is in political activism. That maybe this might be the end of apathy in terms of maybe we'll get better voter turnout, assuming we can find a way to do that safely. That we have more people who are going to maybe volunteer to work for a campaign. Of course, we've already seen big protests for racial justice, a lot of movement around reform around police brutality and so on. That there's just more interest in the civic sphere and in getting involved in changing government and policies and so on. This is where it gets challenging, that even though this is such a big positive that we're seeing more people who are interested in social and civic issues, there is, according to a lot of research papers out there, there's ways to do that that will have a bigger impact than other ways. So obviously bringing visibility to these issues is going to be the first step. And that's already happening. But I think that the challenge and the wisdom that people are going to have to tap into here is to think about where can we have the most impact. So protests have had a big impact already, but then the next step is often the more challenging step, because you have to figure out, well, then what is the next thing after that? Is it, grassroots programs for voter turnout, specific candidates, going to work on specific policies, things like that will probably end up having the biggest impact. But the challenge is going to be trying to find those things as opposed to some things that may not be as effective. And this is where, I think it's remains to be seen what the most effective things are. But generally speaking, things that are not effective are those that divide other people, that attack other people, that increase political polarization, that vilify people who disagree with you. And unfortunately, we've seen some of that too. So my hope is, optimistically, that we'll end up seeing a lot of positive change from this in terms of policy, in terms of civic and government involvement, and that we can try to do this together in a way that's not as divisive. And that's very difficult. I'm not at all trying to say that this is an easy thing. It's a difficult thing in today's political climate. But I'm hopeful that it can happen, and that focus is on that concrete action rather than quite so much on appearances and quite so much on cancel culture and attacking certain people. So I think the most negative thing that's happening right now is around mental health. And I have a paper out on that. It's a preprint, and there's several other studies. One I just saw today from those who administer the General Social Survey. They got a sample in May looking at happiness, and happiness is at a 50-year low. And we found in our paper big increases in mental distress. There's census data, U.S. Census Bureau administered data looking at anxiety and depression. That is also increased by quite a bit during the pandemic. So I think it's really, really clear that we have a mental health crisis on our hands. So we have to keep that in mind, that that's real. That yes, sometimes you're going to have great examples of resilience, and there are a lot of positives, but that for a significant number of people, it looks like it's up to a third of people, there's some pretty serious mental distress, anxiety, and depression going on, probably from the social isolation, from the anxiety around possibly catching the illness, and of course around economic disruptions, which don't look like they're going away anytime soon. So this is a really, really big challenge. So this is also just going to be very, very challenging. I mean, I think one thing that has already happened is more of a move to telehealth for appointments. for therapy, and that needs to continue, and those regulations need to continue to be loosened so insurance will pay for that, so providers can be reimbursed for it, and so on. And then beyond that, really, so much of it has to do with just solving the problems the pandemic has created in terms of, I mean, the thing that everybody's trying to figure out, how to open up the economy without having an increase in cases. A lot of it is also around social isolation. And I think this pandemic has really shown, it's really laid bare a problem that was there to begin with in a lot of Western democracies, which ideally in person, but by video conference or, FaceTime at the very least, that, I mean, basically, if I really wanted to boil down what I'm saying, it's call your grandma, and just keep in touch with those relationships, because there's just a lot of loneliness out there. There's been some real trade-offs in social life when it comes to the pandemic. And it has had some benefits, especially for folks spending more time with their kids. But there's also these downsides that we felt isolated from other people around us. So I think the main thing is just to make that effort in trying to stay in touch with friends and family, and try to keep up with those relationships, even though we can't always do them in the way that we did in 2019, to try to support each other and still, focus on those relationships, and to focus on that and focus on real-time communication, as opposed to being so tempted, as we all are, to go to social media and to go to texting and so on, which isn't in real time, and it has those performative aspects to it, and just doesn't seem to be as good for mental health as actually having a conversation.